You are listening to the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
This is Celebs with Horses, highlighting celebrities from film, TV, the arts, and music, and their love of horses. Hosted by award-winning author, Lisa Wysocki.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Celebs with Horses, and many thanks to today's title sponsor, Hands On Gloves. I'm your host, Lisa Wysocki, and today's celebrity guest has so many accolades, I don't know where to start. We've all heard the song lyric, Bye Bye Miss American Pie, and our guest today, Don McLean, wrote that lyric and that song along with many, many other popular tunes. In fact, American Pie is so popular that it was selected as one of the 5 greatest songs of the 20th century. That just blows me away. One of the 5 greatest songs of the 20th century. Out of all the songs to choose from, this song was chosen from a poll by the National Endowment for the Arts and the Recording Industry Association of America. And get this, the other 4 songs were, you'll never guess, This Land Is Your Land, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, Respect, and White Christmas. That, my friends, is some very good company. Internationally, the song is a hit as well. Recently, the South Korean president serenaded President Joe Biden at a White House dinner with an acoustic version of American Pie while he accompanied himself on guitar. Plus, American Pie has been inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame, and Don himself is also in the Songwriters Hall of Fame, and with good reason. American Pie, along with the songs And I Love You So, Vincent, and Castles in the Air are all Don McLean songs that have been played on the radio more than 3 million times. And artists as diverse as Madonna, Fred Astaire, Chet Atkins, Weird Al Yankovic, Elvis Presley, Josh Groban, Perry Como, and Coolio have performed his songs. That's why I was not surprised to learn that Don McLean was the first songwriter ever to have number 1 singles in 2 separate centuries. But he isn't just a songwriter. Mr. McLean is a world-renowned singer and entertainer who has influenced so many major artists. The legendary Johnny Cash wrote, I Wish I Could Yodel, after hearing Don sing Lovesick Blues in Cash's own house. And Garth Brooks introduced Don McLean as his idol to over 1 million New Yorkers at a 1997 concert in Central Park, and then they sang American Pie together. Despite all of that, the second coolest thing I think about Don McLean's talent is that his song And I Love You So was the theme for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's wedding. The number 1 coolest thing, though, is that Don McLean is a true horseman who says he needs horses in his life to fulfill his soul. Don McLean never set out to be a horseman, but a love of Western movies and a chance sighting of a real-life cowboy changed the course of his life.
I am a Western movie fan, and for many, many years, actually since I was, a baby, really, I grew up on them. I then started collecting Western films on 16 millimeter. And I had about 200 of those. And this was throughout the 70s. And I really loved the early ones, the ones Buck Jones and Tim McCoy and Hoot Gibson and Ken Maynard and, of course, Hopalong Cassidy. These are my favorites. And so as I moved along, one of the things with me is I'm never satisfied with just being a little ways into something. So I decided one day, I remember I was at a ranch someplace. I was about 72 or 3, and a cowboy galloped by me on a horse, and I said, how the hell does he do that? So I have to figure out how that works, Well, that started a whole world of investigation, and I was ready to get a horse. And I got one, and I got a little Appaloosa pony that was actually a barrel horse. And I was not a rider now, and I'm on a I'm on a shotgun here. Okay, this horse was something else. and he was close coupled, and he had every marking on him that an Appaloosa can have. You know, he had black face, and he had black stockings, and he had a beautiful, and his name was Papago Warrior, and he had a beautiful white blanket with peacock spots, and he had, oh Lord, he was and he was the proudest little guy. And he was only about 15 hands, but he always had to be the head of the parade, and he was just a proud animal. And he taught me a lot about horses, okay? So I built a big fenced area, you know, and started to fool with him. And I got bucked off, and I got thrown off, and I got bit, and I got kicked, and I got everything. But I was determined to make him mine.
When I asked how he liked to spend time with his horse, he mentioned trail riding, but also, like some of the other celebrities we've spoken with, Don took time to study and learn about horses and horsemanship.
There were trails that I didn't even know about. I'd been living in this house for 5 years, and I had no idea that I was right by a whole series of trails that went up into the woods. I like to live in the woods, and it actually connected to the Appalachian Trail. So I started out, I was always on my own. I could have gotten killed so easily, but I would read and study about everything. And I got to know a lot about trail riding and Western gear and rigging a horse right and getting the mind of a horse, you know, how they are. And one of the things you learn, is one of the best things that ever came out of this, is patience. You cannot bull a horse around. You cannot muscle a horse, because he wins every time. But you've got to treat him like be gentle and nice with him. And every time he sees you coming along, he's going to know he's going to have a good experience. What people don't realize is they get on the horse, they throw the saddle on, and it bothers him. They jam the bit in his mouth, and he doesn't like it. They get on clumsily. They spur him wrong. Oh, Lord. By the time that horse sees you the third or fourth time, you're not getting on him.
As Don's experience and confidence grew, so did the kinds of activities he did with his horses.
I got into a thing where I like to work with a horse. In fact, there's a movie called American Troubadour, which is all about my career and life and everything. It was on Time Life has it out. You can still get it. And I'm in the woods with these horses, and I, rope logs and pull them off the trail, and I just spend the day with them, and get on them and do more stuff. And that's the thing to do, is use them and get friendly with them.
And then, like a lot of us, Don found true companionship with his horses even after he got to an age where he felt it wasn't safe for him to ride anymore.
Well, I'm not riding anymore, but I do keep 3 horses. And I quit riding a few years ago because I was getting a little slow and a little old, and I didn't want to get hurt.
Smart.
I've got a lot of things to do, but I love keeping them, and I can't imagine not keeping them. Intuitively, and because I've had 30 years of trail riding experience, and all by myself, I never got hurt, and I would ride. I would jump trees that were falling. I'd fly through the woods, I had a lot of experience with these animals, and so I know them.
By happenstance, Don's first horse turned out to be an Appaloosa, but he learned to love the breed, and he enjoyed learning about the history of these very colorful horses.
Well, I don't like the fact that the Appaloosa Horse Club has allowed horses that are basically chestnut color to be called Appaloosas. I think they really messed up with that. There was always, I think there were 6 coat patterns that were, that's how it had to be. And I'm just going to digress for a tiny moment. And there was a man named Claude, and I can't remember his last name.
Claude Thompson. Claude Thompson.
Yeah.
I used to show Appaloosa horses, by the way.
Yeah, and he actually saved the Appaloosa breed because, as people know their history, the Union Army was so annoyed at the Nez Perce Indians for defeating them constantly, and they had these great horses, that when they got them under a flag of truce to give up, they killed as many Appaloosa horses as they could. And some of them ran off and got up in those hills, and they bred with Mustangs. And this is where this guy, Claude Thompson, would see these things, and he had this eye, and he would go on a safari, to bring back some beautiful Appaloosa stud that he found, and he would breed him. So, he saved the whole shebang. Anyway, I do like, I love leopard spot horses. I love them with, they don't have the graying gene. You have to watch out for that because they'll start off real good and then they'll just go to one color. So, but I do like a nice blanket, with spots on it.
When asked about his favorite horse of all time, Don really just could not choose. He finally settled on two very different horses for two very different reasons.
First two I had were the favorite ones that I had. The first one was Papago Warrior. He was this very loud little horse, and I bought him from a lady named April Sell, who lived in Stormville, New York. And the second one I got was a Polish Arab whose name was Siraz, and I bought him from the King family, and they were in, I think, Fishkill or someplace like that in New York. Those two were my favorites, and they were very different. And Siraz was this really beautiful person. I mean, and he really was. He was slow to heat up, but when he heated up, he would not take no for an answer. And sometimes I'd have a friend, and we'd have those two horses in the woods, and of course, my Appaloosa he just had to just let him go. I mean, he just exploded, and Siraz would keep up, and then he'd get a little warmer, and then boom, he was right in with it, and it would be quite something. But I had the lady that I bought him from was just going off to Vassar College. I'm talking about Siraz now. Mm-hmm. And years later, she wrote me a letter, said, "Do you have any pictures of our boy?" And I said, "Yes, I do." So I went in my files, and he lived to be almost 30. Papago did not live he lived to be 19. He started going downhill when he was probably about 17. So I had about 7 years with him. And they were great, exciting years.
Don has done so much in his life, I had to ask about some of his favorite life memories. And his answer totally surprised me.
Well, I got to say something, and people aren't going to like this very much, but I have more good memories with the horses than I ever had with people.
I think people on our show are going to love that.
I can tell you. When I think of the good things and the fun things and the exciting things I did, it was always with them in the woods or, getting the hay in or doing these things that made you feel good. And I was in good shape in those years back in New York. I was loading the hay and shoveling out the stalls. I was always working, and they were always with me. And they were a huge part of my life, which is why I still have them. And I have them in Maine. I live on two coasts. I'm in California now in the desert, but every now and then I get the urge. I'll tell my girlfriend, I got to have a horse, I got to find one somewhere to go visit or to fool with or whatever, and there's a really good place called the Smoke Tree Ranch that's here and very famous. It goes way back, movie stars used to ride there, but it's still in existence. It's in Palm Springs.
And while Don might like horses better than people, there were a few horse people he made exceptions for, especially when he began to upgrade his horses' living accommodations.
Yeah, I want to tell you, there was a lady in Maine, and one of the last horses I had was a gray, and I called him Silver. And this lady spent the whole day with me. I hardly knew her. And she said, "Do you want to go around and look for a horse?" And I said, "Yeah, I really do." Well, she knew about 5 different farms all in the area, and she drove me all over until I found this animal, and I had him for another 10 years, and I had the best time with him. So it really extended into 20, 25 years of constant riding and being involved because of this second horse that I found, thanks to this woman who did this for me. So, and the other thing that's funny is when you get them and you love them, you start building things.
Mm-hmm.
You start building things. So it wasn't good enough for me to have them just be outside. I had to build, so I didn't want to build just a shelter. So I ended up building a whole other structure, which had an apartment on the top and then a 2-stall place underneath. And I would record over there. I would have guests stay there instead of in my house so that, I still had my freedom to be crazy. And it worked out very well because next to me in Garrison was a very famous architect named Russell Wright. And it's a whole story about him. You can Google him. He's very famous. And he said to me, always try to have another, place for your studio or to put relatives or your friends, whatever, so that they're not, in your house all the time. So I did that along with building this barn. Well, I mean, you'd be in there and you'd hear them clomping in and out of the stall. It was funny. They were, it was always there. And it was just great. So it really added tremendous amount to the house that I had there because they got me to build things. It was really perfect. And as I say, I didn't know I was living in it. I'd been there 5 years already. All I was doing was going back and forth to LaGuardia Airport, which is the pit of the Western world, And here I'm living in heaven.
And now, a word from our amazing title sponsor, Hands On Gloves. But stay with us because we'll be right back with more from Don McLean. I love our hands-on gloves, especially because with them you can actually feel the horse as you groom. Really, they're absolutely amazing. Whether it's itchy bug bites, sticky sweat marks, caked on mud, or exuberant springtime shedding, hands-on gloves gives you the tactical tools you need to get the job done right. Hands-on gloves comes in pairs, so you'll get twice the work done in half the time. And since they are available in 3 different sizes, you get the gloves that work best for you. Plus, they come in a number of very cool colors. Hands-on gloves are available at major retailers nationwide or at handsongloves.com. And now, back to the show. Eventually, Don felt the need to pass along some of his horse knowledge and some of his good advice to others.
Later, I moved out of that house, and I lived there for 20 years, and I kept it for another 10 years. And a very nice young lady lived there, and I would talk to her once in a while. And she said, well, I'm going to get a horse. And I said, are you sure you want to do that? And because, well, she said, the barn is here and this and that and the trails. And I said, yeah, I know all that, but are you really ready to own a horse? Because you have to know a lot and you could get hurt. Well, she did get hurt. She, a few months later, she broke her arm or something or other. And I said, I didn't want to say it, but you have got to know a lot of defensive moves that you can make if a horse, rears up or backs up and gets low, or there are a million things they can do. They let you be on them. You're not in control. They let you do what you're doing, and if they don't want you on, believe me, you're not going to stay on. So I had this talent. I don't want to say that really, but I had a gift, I guess, for animals and being nice to them and working with them, and so they didn't take it out on me too much.
When I asked, in addition to patience, what horses had taught him, Don said horses had given him the gift of learning, that every time he was around other horse people, he made a point to learn as much as he could from each of them.
Well, I had a friend who got killed in a motorcycle accident, and that's part of the reason why I stopped riding about 10 years ago. And he was a real Western horseman. And he was into reining and all this stuff. He was tremendous. And he was my farrier, and we would go on trips together. And usually I'm the boss, but he was the boss. Whenever I was with him, I would just listen. And he would tell me things these horses could do. He says, horses will back up by how you use your feet. He was explaining. And then I began to realize I've got lots of videos. I studied them, and just the slightest change in your position on the horse. They know it and they respond to it. It's amazing, really. Horses built the world, and all the great buildings, that we see that are made of stone and 100 years ago, that's horsepower that did that. There were no cars. Horses did everything. And they have the ability to understand enough about, people and do things for them so that they've managed to survive rather than being pushed to the point of extinction. And lucky for them, because we pretty much kill everything else. But I really never, ever got even close to the level of horsemanship that he was talking about or that I would see on some of these videos. I was a one horse guy, and I may be a 2-horse guy. And I knew how to correct them, and I knew how to keep them, being good. You don't fool with any old horse. You got to really know what you're doing. And, most of these stable horses that are broke to death, that's a good place to start if you want to ride.
In getting ready for these shows, I always do a lot of research, and I try to find out everything I can about the celebrity. And this time I learned that Don is an avid collector of Western boots, and I loved his stories about finding some of them.
I do have a lot of Lucchese's I wear because they're a little wider, but I have some that are so beautiful that I had made for me in the 70s, and some I auctioned, but not my favorites. I kept all the favorites. So I've got a lot. I've got about 30 pair up in Maine and another 25 pair out here in California. So I still have over 50 pairs of boots. But I'm really fascinated by that. I knew the bootmaker Paul Bond, who was in Nogales, Arizona, and he made me quite a few pair of beautiful boots. And before that, I knew the man that owned the Griffith Blucher Boot Company, which was in Fairfax, Oklahoma. And the kind of nut that I am, I was on tour. This was probably 1980, and it was a big bus tour because I had a #1 record with Crying, and we were doing a little more work than I would normally do. Of course, it was a big surprise, to have that kind of a record. But here I was in this bus tour. So I said, I want to take the bus over to Dewey, Oklahoma and see the Tom Mix Museum. So we had to go 75 miles out of the way to go to Dewey, Oklahoma. And then we went past Fairfax, and then I revisited the Griffith Blucher boot store. And at the time, Garth Hudson, who plays in the band, was my piano player, and he bought himself a nice pair of boots at Griffith Blucher, and so did I. And the nice thing about that bus was I could throw all kinds of books and pictures and things in there and bring them home at the end of the tour.
Don's story about his side trip on his bus reminded me that he is, after all, a pretty major singer-songwriter. So I asked if horses had influenced his songwriting in any way, and holy cow, his answer made me cry.
I wrote a song called The More You Pay, The More It's Worth, which is a nice song about a boy and a horse, and that's on the Don McLean album. That's the gray covered one. It's the 3rd album I put out. And it's the story of a horse. Well, if you have to hear the song, but it's like almost likening him to an exotic dancer who comes out and is gawked by all these buyers, and the poor horse is no longer with its little boy that had him and loved him. And so at the end of the song, it says, "Where was the boy that rode on your back with his arms holding tight round your neck?" And
you've got me crying here.
I think that way, when I see these animals, I think, my God, they were loved once, and here they are in some, they've had to be. Now, some people I had a friend. He's not my friend anymore, partly because of things like this, he would say. We started riding kind of together, and he found this beautiful, beautiful deal. He got this beautiful Palomino, and it came with a lovely, really great saddle and bridle, the whole bit. He said, well, I paid $500 for him, and when he gets really old, I can just sell him, bring him to the packers, and I can get $1,000 for him. I thought to myself, I don't even want to know you anymore. That was it for me and him.
While Don has told us of many of the things he loves about horses, it seems that as he has gotten older, he has come to better appreciate the non-riding aspects of horse ownership.
One of the nice things that reflects back to your own personal health is conditioning a horse, and seeing him go from, maybe you get him and he's, I think the lady that sold me Shiraz said that she saw him tied to a tree. He was skin and bones, and she recognized, because she was a serious horse person, that this was a Polish Arab. And she bought him and to get him away from this person that was, not feeding him. And she started feeding him and conditioning him, and he became this beautiful jumper who won ribbon after ribbon after ribbon. I mean, he was a sensational athlete. But I think that is a nice thing to get back to your own physical body. Look what you can do with this body you have. You can condition yourself. And if you ride a lot, you're going to get in better shape, because you're going to be stronger. You're going to be quicker. You're going to be more alert. Still, as an old man today, if I sometimes trip, I don't fall because I still have my old center of gravity from riding. It's funny. But that's just a secondary thing. But just conditioning a horse is terrific fun to see them shining and gleaming and, round bellied, and to see that back, you can't see any ribs. It's all nice. And it makes you feel good, and getting in the hay and everything makes you feel good.
And now a word from Yard Glider. But don't go away. We'll be right back with Don McLean. My Yard Glider is my favorite tool. It makes hauling just about anything around the farm easier. Hay, feed, brush, anything. If you haven't seen one of these, Yard Glider is a modern-day stone boat. It loads without lifting, it hauls more, and it dumps faster than a cart. I got my Yard Glider a few months ago, and since then it has helped me move more stuff than I could ever have imagined. I can pull it with the truck or a small riding lawnmower, and I use it every single day. Seriously, every farm and every property should have one. Yard Gliders are made in America, and you can get yours at yardglider.com. Use code HRN and save 10% when you order right now. Now, back to the show. If Don hadn't convinced me by now that he knew horses, this next segment absolutely nailed it. In fact, Jen Hebert, our producer for this episode, and I both think that his last few words here should be on billboards and T-shirts all across the country.
One of the things that I could say is that really, I don't remember, someone said to me, really, I'm a Western rider, the best that I could be, what. The Western rider, if you see drawings by Will James, for example, in some of his books, it's a thin, tall Texan, with a straight up and down look. There's all sorts of things that people do now that I don't like. I like to see a horse's head up, and I don't like his head way down, like below the saddle horn, where they ride there now. I don't like that at all. I like his head up, and I like a rider that sits like an old Western rider. And basically, you turn the horse like you're a carousel pony, and the pole is going right down where it would go through the middle of the carousel horse. So everything turns around your hips and your waist and your legs. You don't jerk his face around. That's the one thing I would hope that people would learn before they even get on a horse is don't pull his head around, turn your body and then urge him around and he'll go around, The more good things you do to make him like you, the more he'll welcome your presence. But if you keep doing things he doesn't like, he's going to keep doing things you don't like. And then he gets sent down the road, oh, he's a bad horse, He's not a bad horse. You're an idiot.
Toward the end of our time together, Don turned a little bit philosophical, and his deep appreciation of the horse really came through.
There's a lot of folk wisdom that is bred in, through centuries of people dealing with these animals. Like I say, they built the world. And Churchill said, when we ended the horse era, civilization began to decline. And I'm inclined to believe that, because really great civility in terms of our architecture, our behavior, our literature, our just so many aspects of living began to decline once the horse was no longer a part of our lives. And of course, now we are so far away from any horse sense in this country because of all this coming technology, which is coming so fast, and people just don't have any plain horse sense. We're asking the dumbest questions on TV, I see, and doing the dumbest things. And it just didn't happen when that was the era, when people had to work and they knew when the sun came up, they knew about the weather, like the other day, we were at the ballpark. I was privileged to know Jackie Autry, who is Gene Autry's widow.
Oh, my goodness.
And she invited me to the ballpark in Anaheim with some friends, and we went out there. And it was a great day. We were in the owner's suite watching this marvelous game, and the clouds came over, and they started talking about, the game canceled. And I looked up, and I knew where the wind. I said, it's not going to rain. It's going to head over that way.
I so enjoyed talking with Don, and I hope you have enjoyed listening to him talk about his love of the horse. But I also wanted to give you the opportunity to see him in concert or to pick up one of his many new projects. So listen in and hear everything else that he's doing outside of horses.
Well, we have, of course, the Paramount Plus documentary, which is The Day the Music Died, the story of Don McLean's American Pie. And that has been a smash hit. In fact, it was among 5 MTV Award nominees. We lost to Selena Gomez, but this is a very successful documentary. It's coming out on DVD. We have a box set of my first 6 albums, which I made for United Artists, which are coming out on United Artists or Universal. We have a new album called American Boys, which is coming out, and we have a second children's book called Vincent, and that's coming out right as we speak. And then I am on tour. I just got back from 24 shows in Australia and New Zealand over 6 weeks. I've been home about 3 weeks, and now I start touring, and in a few weeks I will be in Texas, Stephenville, Texas, which is actually cowboy country. That's where J.B. Mauney and some of those heavyweights live. I'm sitting there, and
they do,
And afterwards I'm going to Virginia, and like that every weekend I'm here, there, and everywhere throughout the remainder of the year until I end up in Hawaii. I've never, ever been asked about horsemanship or horses or anything in all these years I've been being interviewed, and it was a pleasure to talk about them because I could talk about them forever. I love them, and I am fascinated with them and all the things they can do.
Unfortunately, that's it for this episode. And we couldn't do this show without the help of a number of people and businesses. Special thanks go to our guest, Mr. Don McLean. Thanks also to Kurt Webster, Scott Sexton, Jeremy Westby, 2011 PR, Mike Mead, Liz Mallard, Hands on Gloves, Yard Glider, Jen Hebert, Glenn Hebert, and of course, the Horse Radio Network, now part of the Equine Network family. Many thanks too to Kenna, Pat, Jennifer, Kate, Mike, Kim, and Mary, all of whom contributed wonderful questions for this episode. If I missed someone, it wasn't intentional, and know that you are thanked as well. And speaking of questions, if you'd like to ask a question of an upcoming celebrity, just hop on over to horseradionetwork.com to see who might be coming on next and to send in your questions. As for me, look for me at lisawysocki.com. That's LISAWYSOCKY.com. Tune in next time to meet yet another celebrity who loves horses.